This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 139, Power Up Your Sales Team with Content Marketing. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is September 10th, 2015. Hello, or as we say in Texas, howdy, and thank you for joining us today. So happy to have you here. Just a reminder, the Content Marketing Podcast is live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And of course, if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, I know there are many others, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Last week, we revealed the 7 habits of those highly effective content marketers who absolutely rock Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all those other social networks. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or Stitcher or via the RSS feed. This week, we are responding to a listener request. Love when we get those. And we're going to be talking about how our content marketing assets can power up our sales teams. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Kicking off our news feed today, we have some news out of Meerkat. You remember Meerkat? They kicked off this whole live streaming video craze earlier this year, and it's kind of funny. Periscope has really taken over that conversation, but Meerkats, they're still around and they are still competing. They have released a new feature that I think you'll find interesting. When you log on to Meerkat, you will see at the top of your home screen a feed of user-generated hashtags. And the way those work is if you include a hashtag in the title of your stream, it will be included in that hashtag feed at the top of the home screen. And I think this could be really useful, especially for events. So let's say you're hosting a conference or an expo. What you can do is use that hashtag in your own live video streams, and you can encourage your attendees to use it as well, especially like if you have someone who is exhibiting and they're doing a presentation at their booth and they want to do a live video stream of that presentation. What you can do is make sure that everybody's using the same hashtag in those streams, and it will come up, those will come up at the top of that feed. So it'll expose your event to a wider audience and allows those who are not attending to experience those live streams as they happen. So a pretty cool feature out of Meerkat. Also, some news out of Bing. Remember Bing, that other search engine? Bing is, first of all, why are we talking about Bing? We've talked about keywords and using keywords in the titles and our content to fuel that search traffic. Well, now Bing has launched its own keyword planner tool to all U.S. accounts. Now, why should we care about Bing? Well, for one thing, Bing is the second largest search engine in the United States. I'm not sure about worldwide. I don't have those statistics. But, Google is the 800-pound gorilla. But, we also need to be aware of Bing. A lot of people use it. A lot of people really don't like Google. And some people swear they get better results from Bing. So, my husband, for example, he uses Bing faithfully. He will not touch Google anything. For another, and not a lot of people know this, Bing is actually the default search engine on the iPhone. Of course, Apple and Google are competitors, Apple having the Android devices. So, Apple doesn't want to give Google any cred or any business. So they use Bing for their iPhone, for Siri, and also for Safari. So if you pick up your iPhone and say, hey Siri, I want to learn more about B2B content marketing, Siri is going to go through Bing. Anyway, so my point is, Bing has launched its own keyword planner tool. So if you really want to intensify your research on those keywords, you can also do that through Bing. And you can sign up for a free Bing Ads account. You don't have to actually buy any advertising, but you can sign up for that account at bingads.microsoft.com. Okay, for our content hit of the week, this one is directed at to my content creators. And this is a post called Stop Our Exclamation Point Addiction. This is by Patrick Armitage over on the Marketing Land blog. And as the content world becomes more and more crowded and as marketers struggle to stand out, they're trying everything they can think of to get users' attention, to really stand out and to get those all-important clicks. And as Patrick points out in this post, first it was clickbait, and you remember clickbait. It was a huge problem. Made a lot of news a few months ago. Headlines like, I don't know, little girl eats a peanut butter sandwich. You won't believe what happens next. That's kind of, customers, users are really onto that. And it's not as big of a thing anymore. But according to Patrick, now the epidemic is exclamation points. And he actually gives a screenshot of his email inbox, and it's like every single subject line has an exclamation point, is it? So, and Patrick proclaims, and I'm going to quote here, "It's time for marketers to stop the deluge of exclamation points and instead raise the creative bar." And he raises an interesting point on a larger scale. As marketers, we're looking at what works, and we're looking at what's right, what are those best practices? And sometimes it's really hard to walk that fine line. On one hand, you can't, as the statisticians say, or the analytics guys say, you can't argue with what works. If something gets you more clicks, then, you can't argue with that. But then again, are we cheapening ourselves in the rush to get those clicks and to get that attention? There is no right or wrong answer, but I think Patrick raises some interesting points, especially when it comes to our exclamation point addiction. So highly recommended, and I will share the link in the blog post for this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. Power up your sales team with content marketing. Today's topic is a response to a suggestion from Alessandra. Alessandra is one of our longtime friends of the podcast over in Italy. We've corresponded several times, and she actually sent me a suggestion to talk about how content feeds into our sales materials, things like data sheets, brochures, maybe even the website, and the sales process in general. And Alessandra, thank you so much. I love this topic because, for one thing, it really enlightened me to the fact that, I treat content as part of the marketing process, and content is out there to raise brand awareness. It's to keep you top of mind. It's to bring in leads, et cetera, et cetera. And then once the sales team takes over, they kind of rely on their charm and their people skills to close the deal. When in reality, content really needs a place at the table all the way through that process, all the way through signing on the dotted line and beyond. So thank you, Alessandra, for opening my eyes to that idea and bringing my attention to the importance of content in the sales process. So let's take a moment to look at sales and marketing in the average mid-sized to larger organization. In an ideal world, sales and marketing are BFFs. Best friends forever. They have the same goal, which is to bring in new business to the organization. Marketing puts out the bait and sales reels in the fish. But often that we're not seeing that harmony. In fact, we often see sales and marketing at odds with each other. Sales looks at marketing and says, we're the ones out there closing the business. You guys sit there and play with your graphics and your PowerPoints. And then marketing looks at sales and says, hey buddy, if it weren't for us creating brand awareness, nobody would know about us. We wouldn't be getting any leads, and nobody would be taking your calls because we'd be a totally unknown commodity. And back and forth and back and forth. this issue is, as they say in the military, above my pay grade. But that really is why we tend to see sales and marketing as separate, when really they're two ends of the same process, and they can benefit so much from working together. So from the point of view of a content marketer, how can we use content to not only serve our marketing goals, but also to empower our sales team and to give them the advantage when they go out on those sales calls? The first thing we can do is to infuse content into those traditional sales materials. So, when we think of brochures and sales presentations, we think of those as saying, hey, look at us, aren't we great? Here are our wonderful features and benefits. Here's why you should sign on the dotted line right now. When in reality, those sales materials give us an opportunity to not just give a sales pitch, but to show our expertise and to deliver some value. This is especially true on the B2B side, where customer education is so important, because our products and our services tend to be a lot more complex, and we really need that educational aspect in what we do. So what can we do? How can we content up those traditional sales materials? One thing we can do is to infuse content into our printed brochures. And really look at your current brochures, whether it's a trifold or a pocket folder or a larger brochure, and look for opportunities to include, where can we include a quick tip in the sidebar? Where can we include data that people might not have heard of, that can help us supplement what we're talking about here? Where can we talk about the latest research, especially research that you might have conducted? If you did a survey and found some really interesting insights into your customers' pain points, by all means share that in your brochures. Make it a not just an extended sales pitch, but a living, breathing content document that can actually help educate your prospect and turn that prospect into a much more informed consumer. Another thing we can do is look at your website, not just your blog, but throughout your website, look at opportunities to really infuse content into that conversation. Where can we include quick tips? Where can we include how-to videos? Where can we include links to resources, free resources that we've created to help people, again, become more informed consumers? One thing that Alessandra mentioned in her email was things like data sheets. Data sheets are pure information about a particular product or maybe a particular service, but there's nothing says we can't infuse some content in there to bring those data sheets to life a little bit. Where can we include some of the latest research? Where can we include a very brief success story? And when I say brief, I mean a couple of sentences, because data sheets are, people go there to get data, but where can we supplement that information with some value-driven content? We want to keep it short, we want to keep it subtle, but that content can really make that experience of reading that data sheet, that website, that brochure much more interesting and deliver much more value to our prospect. Another thing we can do is create new leave-behinds that are focused on content. And sales teams love leave-behinds. When they are sitting with that prospect, they want to be able to have something in their hands that they can slide across the table or actually put in that prospect's hands. They want something tangible. They don't want to just say, oh, go to our website, read our blog, there's lots of great information there. No, they want to have something to actually put in that prospect's hands. So think about how you can create content or leverage content you already have to create some value-driven print resources. Can we take that online checklist that we created and offer as a downloadable PDF? Can we create that as a print asset? Can we, maybe laminate it? Can we use that existing content to create a leave behind? White papers. Can we go ahead and print out that white paper, that research report that we worked so hard on to give that sales associate something to hand that prospect? Another thing that a lot of marketing teams do to empower their sales folks is to take those electronic resources and load them onto a flash drive. You can order branded flash drives. I'm sure you've seen them. They're all over trade shows and everywhere. But create and have created a branded flash drive and load it with some of your, maybe 3 of your most valuable assets. Maybe it's maybe it's a white paper, an audio resource, and a resource like a checklist or something, a kit that they can actually offer on that flash drive as a very valuable leave behind for your prospects. Another thing you can do is have your designers or your marketing team create a print version of your latest e-newsletter. And don't just, go to your email program and print it out because it's going to look, it's not going to look great, but have them create a beautiful print version of that e-newsletter that you can hand to the prospect and say, hey, here's an e-newsletter that we send out to our audience once a week. It's absolutely free. You're welcome to sign up for it. No obligation. And just show them the kind of content that you're putting out there on a regular basis. Another thing you can do to create a wonderful leave behind is if you have an ebook out there and people really love it, you're getting good feedback on it, get it printed. You can do a short run very economically, have someone design a cover and go ahead and get that ebook printed. You may have heard the expression, a book is the new business card. And it's really true. If your salesperson is sitting across from a prospect and says, hey, I want to give you this book that our company published, that's a huge prestige factor. That tells a prospect, wow, these people really know what they're doing and they really want to help solve problems. They're not really all about the sale. They're really out there trying to help people deal with those pain points. So those are a few suggestions for creating brand new content-focused leave behinds. And get creative with your sales team and ask them, what would be really cool? What are your competitors doing that you really envy? What can we create that you don't have right now that will really help you conduct a successful sales meeting? And see what you can come up with. The third thing that you can do is to arm your sales force with content for follow-up communications. Very often the sales team really isn't in the know of what's out there, what all content you've created. And if they do, they don't necessarily have that at their fingertips. And something I hear a lot from salespeople is they have a challenge with those follow-up calls and their follow-up emails. And they feel like they're saying, hey, just wanted to follow up on our conversation, see if you have any questions, see if you've had a chance to review that proposal, give me a call, blah, blah, blah. And they hate those because they're just so awkward. Well, what we can do as content marketers is to give our sales team a library of content pieces that they can share in those follow-up communications. So instead of sending an email saying, hey, wanted to follow up, do you have any questions, had a chance to review the proposal, etc., etc., what they can do instead is send an email saying, hey, I just came across this white paper that we released a couple of months ago. Can't think why I didn't bring it up in our meeting, but I think you'll find it really interesting. Or they could say something like, we just published a blog post that touched on exactly what you and I were talking about a couple of days ago. And that way, sales teams loves doing things like this because that way they're getting back to that prospect. They're getting back to that prospect's top of mind and not in a pushy salesy way saying, hey, I really want to close this business. Not that we would say that, but that's the implication. But they're really coming forward as a trusted advisor who has this prospect's best interest at heart and who is providing something of value. So make sure that your sales team knows about these assets and that they know how to use them, and that they are using them in those follow-up communications can make a huge difference in that follow-up and in being able to get back in touch with that prospect. And then another thing that I really recommend is that closing the loop and opening those lines of communication. Your salespeople are some of the best sources of information that you have available in terms of what to create content around. Those salespeople are pounding the pavement. They're on the phone. They're talking to people. They know the pain points. They are hearing those questions, and that information. And of course, they're focused on what they do. They don't say, wow, I just got back from this sales call. I can't wait to get back with the marketing team on what I learned and help them do their jobs better. We have to foster that relationship, and we have to get with them saying, hey, what are you hearing out there? What questions are you getting? What are people's pain points? And they can really be tremendously helpful assets in our content creation process. We can tap them for that information and say, wow, that question would make a great blog post, or we really need to create a resource or a white paper around this issue. Clearly it's on people's minds, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, let's see if we can get the love back, right, between sales and marketing, because especially as content marketers, we can do a lot to really empower our sales teams in ways they didn't know we could help them. And then on the other side, we can open those lines of communication, really help them help us to come up with creative ideas on content. Not that we're coming up with in our little content marketing bubble, but they are finding when they're out there pounding the pavement. So that is my take on using content to power up your sales team. So Alessandra, I want to thank you again for your suggestion. I hope you found something useful in there. And I encourage you, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, there's something I really want to learn more about, please send me a suggestion. I am open to anything you want to recommend, and I would love to hear from you. And I will give you that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about printed content assets versus online content. For decades, print was the only option. If we wanted to create something, we had to print it. And then in the 90s, along came websites and emails and eventually social media, and marketers everywhere rejoiced because this was all free, or, the resources were free, but to publish the content was free. We had a quick turnaround. We could publish something instantly, and we could get instant reaction from our audiences. And what we're finding now is that print is actually making a comeback. And the reason is we are so inundated with electronic messages all day, every day, that print it's kind of special again. I've mentioned on this podcast before that my secret weapon in my sales process is the handwritten note card. Man, people get that and they're just bowled over. I'm talking to a client about a newsletter, and he's considering bypassing email altogether and just creating a beautiful, well laid out, well printed newsletter to deliver to his audience. And another thing to consider is that print is a differentiator because, yes, print costs money. It costs money to take that ebook and have it printed out. It costs money to print and send that newsletter. But, because it costs money, it differentiates you. It says that, we're willing to invest in this process, and it's kind of a prestige factor, quite frankly. It's something that not everyone is willing to spend money on, but if you are, then it could really make you stand out. So if you are, kind of struggling with how do we stand out above the noise, how can we be different, consider adding print options to your content marketing strategy, because print is in many ways making a strong comeback. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. Also have 2 events coming up that I really want to tell you about. Really excited about these. The first is a special teleclass that is coming up on September 16th, and it is called Help My Website Content Sucks. And this is the result of some inquiries I've received from people who say those exact words, their website content sucks. So we're going to share some really great strategies for rehabbing, if you will, that website content. Now, I've created a short link. It is case sensitive, so I'll walk you through it. It's bit.ly/my website content sucks. And the first letter of each word is capitalized. So capital M, capital W, capital C, capital S. That's the short link. If you run into problems, just give me a shout and I will be happy to send you that link. So would love to have you there. Also, we've got our monthly webinar series, which is the fourth Thursday of the month. And this month will be called Amp Up, Top 3 Ways to Boost Your Marketing with Content. That's coming up Thursday, September 24th at 12 p.m. U.S. Central Time. And you can register right now at resonancewebinar.com. As always, I'd like to leave you with a quote, and today's actually comes from an unknown source. Today's quote is, "Pay respect and I'll pay attention," unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.